Today we're exploring different types of fishing lines, what's good and bad about each one, and whether you really need to buy more than one of them. First, let's take a look at the cheapest option, monofilament line. Monofilament, or mono, is inexpensive, quiet, and easy to use. It's the best line for beginners for those reasons. It also works well with all kinds of reels and is easy on the guides of your fishing rod, unlike some cheaper braided lines which can cut into lower quality guides as you pull a big fish in. Monofilament line is great for using with a bobber or when bottom fishing for things like walleyes, carp, and catfish because it tends to lay on the surface for a while after a cast. That makes it easy to watch your line to help detect bites. Mono also makes a good line or leader option for topwater baits like frogs and poppers because it reduces visibility of the bait and has a bit of stretch. All of these benefits of mono come with a lot of drawbacks too. One of the big ones is the amount of memory that monofilament line has. This is where the line takes on the shape of the reel spool after it sits for a while, and your line will come off in tight coils. These coils will greatly impact your ability to feel or see a bite, and they can decrease your casting distance too, so they need to be removed occasionally. Check out our video on removing memory coils to learn more about this. Monofilament is also more susceptible to damage from UV light. Replacing it every couple of years is usually a good idea if you spend a fair amount of time fishing. Monofilament line stretches a ton, usually 15 to 20%. The stretch allows the line to absorb shock from a hard strike or hook set, but it can also make it difficult to set the hook on a fish if you have a lot of line out, because so much energy is spent stretching the line before it can drive the hook in. On long casts, this can sometimes be the difference between catching a fish and missing a fish. Mono has low visibility in the water, similar to the visibility of fluorocarbon. In this shot here, I'm running 8-pound monofilament line, and it's almost impossible to see underwater. The visibility does change a bit with water clarity and weather conditions. Braided line of the same weight is thinner, but a lot more visible in the water. In this shot, the first 4 inches of line are 6-pound monofilament, then 6-pound fluorocarbon, then 6-pound braid. The braid is very easy to see, but the mono and fluorocarbon are much less visible. Braided lines are extremely thin and strong, which are both big advantages. A thinner line casts farther and allows for better sensitivity to bites on your line. I hated braided line for a long time, and it was because I started with cheap line, and this was many years ago before recent advances in braided line technology. That early braid was stiff and couldn't cast very far, and it was really noisy coming through my rod guides. More expensive braids are very flexible and smooth, which results in a much farther casting distance and quieter operation. In fact, it can usually cast much farther than a monofilament line of the same weight. Today's braided lines are still noisier than mono for sure, but I'm willing to accept that because of braid's other advantages. When spooling a rod with braid, make sure that your reel has a braid-ready spool, which is where part or all of it has a rubberized coating or rubber strips to grip onto the line, and that prevents it from spinning on the spool. You can also put 30 feet or more of monofilament line on the spool first, or a strip of electrical tape, which will do the same thing as a braid-ready spool. Since braid is so visible in the water compared to other types of line, it's usually best to have some monofilament or fluorocarbon line tied to your lure as a leader. This way your lure looks more natural and it allows for some shock absorption when you set the hook. Braid really excels for fishing heavy cover and heavy baits. It has zero stretch, so hook sets are fast and powerful. It also allows you to quickly drag a fish out of heavy vegetation or wood before it can get you wrapped up. Keep in mind that the zero stretch and high strength of braid can also result in you ripping a lure right out of a fish's mouth on a hard hook set, so be careful with this and set your drag properly. You can also add a leader of monofilament or fluorocarbon to add a little stretch and help with those hard hook sets. Braid also has a tendency to tear if it gets dragged across rocks or other objects. This is another reason to use a leader of monofilament or fluorocarbon, which is more resistant to abrasion. Fluorocarbon or fluoro lines are expensive and can be stiff with high memory, so they can be hard to cast and line coils can be a real problem. That said, newer formulations of fluorocarbon are becoming much better. Fluoro is commonly used for crankbaits and sinking baits because the line sinks quickly and it can help you get a bait down deeper in the water. Keep in mind that your line may lay across plants or structure if you pause for a long time with something like a jerkbait. One thing that fluorocarbon really excels at is for ice fishing. Having a sinking line is crucial for getting your jig down to the fish quickly and feeling bites. Fluorocarbon is more sensitive than mono, so it's better for detecting light bites through the ice. I tend to use braid only as a main line, and I use it for tip-ups in the winter. I will occasionally tie braid directly to a frog bait, but there are so many pike and muskie in my area that I usually add a tougher leader to deal with all those teeth. I use mono as a main line and for leaders, and I use fluorocarbon only for leaders or for ice fishing rods. You'll hear a lot of claims about fluorocarbon being invisible underwater, but I've found it to be about the same as monofilament line. The visibility does change a bit depending on the angle to the sun, but seems to change equally with either type of line. I use both fluorocarbon and monofilament as leaders on my braided setups. So there you have it. All three types of lines have their pros and cons. If you're just getting into fishing, get some 8 or 10 pound monofilament line or some 15 to 20 pound braided line. I use mostly Berkeley trilene monofilament and Suffix 832 braided lines. I hope you learned a thing or two about fishing lines in this video. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.